Welcome to the complete story for Metal Gear. With the series completely done, we wanted to cover everything in one tight and concise video. The purpose of this is that we had minor facts incorrect in our more in-depth video due to translations changing after we wrote up the original scripts. This is going to help explain the story of Big Boss and Solid Snake in its most bare bones fashion, with very little video due to the fact that Konami flags the video almost every time. I hope this helps you understand everything from beginning to end for two of the largest characters. Starting with the game Snake Eater. Big Boss was born around 1935, and he grew up and was in the military and then fought in the Korean War. At some point, he was involved in the US testing of an airborne detonation of the hydrogen bomb. Through the effects of the testing, however, he became sterile, unable to have children of his own. But in 1950, he became a disciple of the Boss, the greatest soldier to ever live. He learned everything he knew from her and was involved in the creation of CQC. Then, in 1964, he was dispatched to the Virtuous Mission, where he became a member of the CIA's Fox unit. He was to rescue the Soviet scientist Sokolov, who wanted to defect to the US, and he was given the codename Naked Snake for this mission. Before getting Sokolov out, he runs into Major Ocelot, a member of GRU, and after a short battle, he finishes it by knocking Ocelot out. Later, Snake sees Volgin, the mastermind behind the entire plot, meeting up with the Boss. She then defects to the Soviets and captures Sokolov again, and then gives Volgin a nuke which he uses on a research facility. Snake is in shock that she defected, and after confronting the Boss, Snake is injured and pulled out to receive medical assistance. The US, thinking that Snake knew about the defection, said that he would only be pardoned if he was able to go back, get Sokolov, and kill the Boss. The intent was to prove that it was the Boss acting solely, and the US knew nothing of the nukes. This mission was called Operation Snake Eater. Snake was then to meet up with a KGB contact, but instead Ava was there in the contact's place, and she told him where Sokolov was. As he explores the base, he learns of a future project entitled Metal Gear. While making his way across the base to rescue Sokolov again, he disguises himself as one of the Groznygrad soldiers. That's when he meets Sokolov, but Volgin catches them and sees through the disguise. Volgin shoots Sokolov and he captures Snake. He then tortures Snake to see what he knows, and he asks if he's here for the Philosopher's Legacy. The legacy is the entire purpose of Volgin's agenda, as it's a $100 billion cachet of money collected by a secret organization in World War II. The Boss steps in and tells Volgin that he won't get anything out of Snake because he's one of her disciples. Volgin begins with his questions, and to cover him, the Boss says that some of what happened was due to her. This raises suspicions between the group, and Ocelot begins to suspect Ava, and when he closes in on her, Snake knocks him over. As Ocelot is being knocked away, his gun brushes over Snake's right eye, going off. Snake, now losing his right eye, is told by Ava how to escape, and then Snake does just that, meeting with Ava outside. He then returns to Groznygrad to destroy the hangar for the Shagohod. When that failed, Snake defeats Volgin and later destroys the Shagohod itself. Reaching the end of his mission, Snake now needs to kill the Boss, and this was the hardest part of his mission because even at this time, he couldn't believe that she had actually defected against the US. But she wanted peace, and to be defeated by one of her own disciples. Begrudgingly, Snake defeats and kills the Boss, and then he returns home. He receives the Distinguished Service Cross and the codename Big Boss for surpassing her. In the final moments of this game, he learns that everything was a part of a giant plan to shift the blame of the nuke going off, and for the US to get a hold of the Philosopher's Legacy. Disgusted by what his country made him do, killing his mentor who is now forever known as a traitor, he leaves Fox. But later, in 1970, he creates Foxhound to carry on the original ideals of Fox. Between the events of Snake Eater and Peace Walker, Major Zero, the man that was helping Big Boss throughout the entire game of Snake Eater as Mission Command, comes in control of the Philosopher's Legacy. He then formed the Patriots, which consisted of himself, Signet, Paramedic, and even Ocelot, and he wanted Big Boss to be the icon of it. He wanted to carry on the Boss's original dream of uniting the world as one, the message that gained her so many people as followers. While Big Boss did join originally, he started to now hate what he has become and began to resent Zero as he wanted to have more power. Major Zero's plan was to gain more power to control the world from behind the scenes, a secret organization. So with Zero scared that Big Boss might leave them, he started the project Les Enfants Terribles and wanted to use the Big Boss's DNA to make genetically enhanced soldiers. He also wanted to create clones of Big Boss and hoping of continuing using Big Boss and his children or clones as the organization's icons. Most were failures, but through this was the birth of Solid, Liquid, and Solid as Snake. Tensions were already high between Big Boss and Zero, but when Big Boss found out about the cloning, he left the Patriots. Big Boss drifted around, becoming a soldier for hire of sorts. Around this time frame, in an adventure that is outside of Hideo Kojima's original Saga, Big Boss accepts a mission from the Colombian government, ambushing a guerrilla unit. The leader of that group was Kaz Miller, and Snake killed all except for Miller. Big Boss then decided to create Soldiers Without Borders, and he makes Miller second in command. Next up is Peace Walker. In late 1974, Big Boss moves the Soldiers Without Borders to the coast of Colombia. Big Boss was asked by Roman Galvez and Paz Ortega of the yet-to-be-made United Nations University for Peace to push back a security company that entered Costa Rica, but Boss said no, not wanting his soldiers to become dogs of war. However, after hearing a recording Ramon had of Paz's missing friend, he swears that he heard the voice of the original boss, and he agreed to help. Ramon then gives Big Boss access to an offshore base to set up operations, and this is where Mother Base began. Shortly after starting his operations, Big Boss learns that the CIA is bringing nukes into Costa Rica. Trying to get more information, Big Boss meets with Amanda, the leader of the National Liberation Front. Soon after, Amanda is injured when she is trying to make a rescue attempt at saving her brother Chico and is taken back to Mother Base. Big Boss then goes out to rescue Chico himself, and after bringing him back, he learns that the nukes are being stored on the nearby Mount Irazu. After getting into the mountain, Big Boss overhears an argument between Huey Emmerich, a mechanical engineer, and Hot Coldman, the CIA's mercenary group leader. Boss learns that Peace Sentinel, the mercenary group, is behind the Peace Walker project, and they are building 4 AI weapons as deterrents to stop global warfare. Huey, finding out through Coldman that he is actually going to use them to fire off a nuke to show how powerful they are, refuses to help anymore, and Coldman pushes Huey in his wheelchair down a flight of stairs. Big Boss is there to help Huey up, but soon after, Pupa, one of the 4 AI weapons, is released to take Big Boss out. With Huey's support, Big Boss is able to defeat it, and then Huey tells Boss about an AI facility that's stationed in a Mayan pyramid. While on his way to the facility, he manages to rescue Cecil, Paz's missing friend, who was actually captured by Coldman because she accidentally recorded a conversation of the mammal pod. Cecil tells Big Boss that the voice he heard on the voice recorder is actually the AI mammal pod, and it was programmed in the boss's image. Once getting inside the AI facility, he meets Strangelove, the AI's creator. He then destroys 2 of the other AIs, Crystalis and Cocoon, and tries to stop Peace Walker, but he's not able to and it gets away. Coldman then captures Paz, and Boss follows them to find out where Peace Walker went. Back on Mother Base, Galvez reveals himself to actually be Vladimir, and he's been using Big Boss so that the Soviet Union could conquer over Central America, but he gets locked up on Mother Base after announcing this. Coldman activates the launch sequence for Peace Walker and aims it at Mother Base, but Boss is able to ultimately stop the AI. After everything that just happened, Big Boss decides to build his own weapon, naming it Metal Gear Zeke and using a part from the salvaged AI. Toward the end of finishing Zeke, Boss figured out that there was a spy within the Soldiers Without Borders due to Vladimir constantly escaping. And during further construction of Zeke, Vladimir once again escapes Mother Base, but this time Vladimir was shot and killed by Big Boss in self-defense. Trying to figure out how all of this could be happening, Big Boss receives word that Zeke was recently hijacked. He rushes out there to find that it was Paz who stole Zeke. Paz begins to tell Boss that her real name is Pacifica Ocean, and she is actually an agent of Cypher. Cypher is the current name of Major Zero's secret organization. All of this was planned by Cypher in an attempt to make Big Boss come back and join Major Zero. But once again, Big Boss refused. He didn't agree with Major Zero's plans. Paz threatened to launch a nuke at the East Coast and blame it on Soldiers Without Borders, but Boss was able to stop and defeat Zeke. Then, after an explosion, everyone thought that Paz was lost, but Big Boss didn't think so. Miller then explains that he too was working with Cypher, and that he was the one who had set up the meeting with Vladimir and Paz in the beginning. Miller was hoping that Big Boss would return, but seeing as Big Boss has no intentions of going back to Cypher, Miller decides to continue to work underneath him. Next up is Ground Zeroes. In the February of 1975, Big Boss and Miller get a request from the IAEA to inspect their mother base because of a recent purchase of nuclear fuel. Big Boss and Miller both knew that this was actually Cypher trying to pull strings from the recent defeat after Peace Walker. So he decides to tell the IAEA that he refuses the inspection because they are a private company and not a country. However, Huey wants to avoid any suspicion, and he sends another letter stating that they instead have changed their minds and they will allow the inspection. So Big Boss decided to start moving all of his AFVs offshore, and he begins to burn all documentation containing information about the nuke that they had. Before the inspection, Boss learns that Paz was actually rescued by a fisherman and that she's being held on an American black site in Cuba known as Camp Omega. Seeing as she failed her mission, Cypher thought that she may be a double agent for the Soldiers Without Borders, so they began torturing her. While they wanted to rescue her, with the inspection coming up, they were not able to do anything and were going to rescue her afterwards. But Chico decided to sneak onto a supply ship that was going back to Cuba so that he could rescue Paz himself, and he ended up getting caught himself. Because of this, Big Boss was forced to start the mission of extracting both of them as the UN made their way to Mother Base for the inspection. Big Boss sneaks into Camp Omega and he quickly finds where Chico is being held, but when Boss reaches him, Chico begins to panic and he tells him that Paz is dead, so Big Boss is forced to knock him out before alerting anyone. Chico had a cassette player, and on the tape that he was given was Paz being tortured, but Big Boss was able to locate where she was located. He went deeper into the campsite and he was able to finally locate her, and he took her back to the helicopter. But while on their ride back to Mother Base, Chico looked at Paz and he noticed that she had an incision in her stomach. Big Boss realized that Paz had a bomb inside of her and the medic had to open her up to remove it. After they get the bomb out of her, he sees the XOF secret Black Ops unit of Cypher attacking Mother Base. Big Boss then sees Miller down on the platform being attacked, and he flies in to rescue him. As he jumps out, he gives Miller some cover fire, and then he tries to get some people onto the chopper, but a giant crane comes crashing down and they had to leave. Miller looks to see Paz there and he begins blaming her for everything as everyone tries to hold him back. But Paz begins to step forward and she begins to tell Big Boss that there is another bomb inside of her, and she jumps out of the helicopter just before the blast goes off. However, the explosion from the second bomb inside of Paz causes the Soldiers Without Borders helicopter to collide into the pursuing XOF helicopter. Even though they crash landed into the sea, Boss, Miller, and the medic were rescued, and they were treated in a hospital. Miller managed to recover, but Big Boss and the medic fell into a deep coma. This part takes place in Phantom Pain. After Big Boss and the MSF medic were stable, Zero had Ava move both of them to a hospital in Cyprus to remain hidden. Zero was still controlling all of the information, so he kept this a secret that even Skullface and the XOF could not find. When Miller recovered from his injuries, he noticed that Big Boss wasn't there anymore, and he contacted Zero to find out where he moved him. Zero told Miller that it would be best if he stayed away, but he told him that when Big Boss awoke, he would tell him. Ocelot was in charge of the security at the hospital in Cyprus, and at times would talk to Zero. Zero told him about the plan to create two Big Bosses. Ocelot thought it was another cloning project, but Zero told him that the plan was to make the medic a mental copy of Big Boss. Ocelot, only caring about the real Big Boss's best intentions, agreed to Zero's plan. In 1976, Zero received a lapel pin that belonged to the boss sent by Skullface. Secretly, Skullface coded the pin in a form of vocal cord parasite so that when Zero got the pin, he got sick because he accidentally pricked his finger on it. In 1977, Zero did visit Boss and the medic, who would later become known as Venom Snake, but he was only concerned with Big Boss, and he left, and then he went into hiding for good. In 1984, Big Boss awoke from his coma before the medic did, and Ocelot told him that they know that he was awoken. Ocelot then began to tell Big Boss what had happened since he slipped into his coma. Zero was attacked, and no one knows where he went or if he's even alive anymore. Because of Zero falling ill from a biological attack, he put Donald Anderson in charge of Cypher. The plan was to make the medic the new Big Boss, while the real Big Boss started to build his military nation, Outer Heaven. The medic's face had been cosmetically changed to look like Big Boss, and he underwent hypnosuggestions that would also make him think that he was the real Big Boss. On February 26, 1984, the medic, now going by the name Venom Snake, awoke to find that the hospital that he was in was under attack by the XOF. He gets attacked by a female assassin but is stopped by another patient calling himself Ishmael. Ishmael began to help Venom get out and make his way outside of the helicopter, but that's when they found themselves trapped between two groups of XOF soldiers. But before the soldiers could kill them, the man on fire starts to kill the soldiers when they start to shoot at him. Ishmael, seeing the bullets are not affecting the man on fire, shoots at a sprinkler above himself, putting out the flames so that Venom and Ishmael can make their escape. After another run-in with the man on fire and the third child, the two manage to get outside and steal an ambulance to get away. While Ishmael and Venom start driving away, they're attacked by an XOF helicopter that causes them to crash through a barrage set up by the soldiers. Venom starts to come to and he notices that Ishmael isn't there anymore, and he crawls out to be rescued by Ocelot. However, before this happens, Ishmael is pulled out of the ambulance by Ocelot, and it is here that we find out that Ishmael was actually the real Big Boss. After changing into some clothes, Big Boss receives a passport of the medic, with Ocelot telling him to go by that name and to change his face. It is here that we see the real Big Boss leaving before the events of Phantom Pain. Once Big Boss is actually out of the picture, Venom Snake wakes up from the crash that they were just in. Ocelot told Big Boss that he would look after Venom Snake, so Ocelot goes back to the crash to rescue Venom from the Man on Fire. Once they manage to get away, Ocelot takes Venom Snake to Afghanistan to rescue Miller. Miller was actually captured by the Soviet forces, and once Venom extracted him, Venom went on to become the new leader of the Diamond Dogs and help rebuild the new Mother Base. Venom's main purpose during the Phantom Pain incident was to eliminate Skullface and the XOF. As he was going through his search, he ran into a sniper named Quiet, but Venom was able to defeat her in a sniper duel. Ocelot then suggested bringing her back to try and get more information out of the XOF, but Venom Snake decides to keep her as she may become an asset. During later missions, Miller also receives information from Huey that he needs to be rescued. Once Venom brings Huey back to Mother Base, Huey informs Venom Snake of a new type of Metal Gear called Philanthropus that Skullface has actually been working on. Huey would be interrogated frequently due to Kaz still suspecting the original attack on Mother Base being his fault. As time went on, Venom would also come across Eli, one of the clones of the actual Big Boss. Eli at the time was the leader of a group of child soldiers, but after Venom defeated him, Venom brought him back to Mother Base to join the team. Later, an epidemic began to spread over Mother Base, killing several people, which was later discovered to be the vocal cord parasite that was used to knock Major Zero out of the equation. Through his research, Venom Snake would later learn that there is a researcher going by the name Code Talker that could actually stop the spread of the virus. After one final interrogation, Huey did provide the location of the lab built by the Russian philosophers and the location of Skullface. After going to the final lab and fighting against a young Psycho Mantis going by the name the Third Child and stopping Eli in his attempts to overrule everything, Venom Snake would eventually stop the entire event by killing Skullface. After the entire event was over, Venom Snake would find a recording left behind by the real Big Boss, telling him how they are now two of the same people. They are both Big Boss. Venom would continue to work under the name Big Boss, taking command for him of Outer Heaven, while Big Boss returned to the US to work as the commander of Fox. Next up in the game series chronologically is Metal Gear. David was born in the year 1972 as a result of the cloning project. He spent a lot of his years with different foster parents until he went into the Green Berets in his teens. After being successful there, he went on to join Foxhound in 1995, where Big Boss was the commander. Big Boss at this time knew who David was, but he gave him the codename Solid Snake and he trained him personally. Shortly after joining, he was given his first mission, and that mission was to infiltrate Outer Heaven, the project that Big Boss had been working on ever since he sent Venom Snake to pretend to be him. At this time, Outer Heaven had started to become a military nation that was in South Africa. Solid Snake was sent in to rescue the captured Foxhound agent Gray Fox, Frank Yeager, the same Frank Yeager that Big Boss picked up during the 1980s. And the goal was to find out about the Metal Gear that Fox had talked about just before his capture. Solid Snake was able to sneak into Outer Heaven by way of underwater insertion and began freeing the POWs, but he found out that Gray Fox was actually being held on a higher level security cell in the basement. However, Solid Snake couldn't find a way to get to Gray Fox other than getting himself captured. Once inside, Solid Snake was able to locate Gray Fox and he told him about Metal Gear. Metal Gear was a bipedal nuclear-armed tank that was able to launch a nuclear warhead from anywhere in the world. Gray Fox also told Solid Snake about the doctor who helped develop Metal Gear in order to find a way to destroy it. With codec support from Schneider, Diana, Jennifer, Snake was able to locate and rescue the doctor who had created the Metal Gear, but he wouldn't help Solid Snake until he rescued his daughter Ellen. After locating and rescuing Ellen, the doctor tells Snake that the Metal Gear was located on the 100th floor of the basement, and the method of placing plastic explosives at its feet in a very specific order. Once Snake got to the Metal Gear hangar, he placed the bombs in the order that was needed, and he destroyed it, but in doing so he also activated the self-destruct switch. Solid Snake starts to escape, but is confronted by Big Boss. He tries to keep Snake down with him as Outer Heaven begins to explode, but Solid Snake is able to defeat Big Boss, killing him, and he climbs out and gets away before Outer Heaven blows up. However, we get a message at the end of the game seeing Big Boss telling Snake that they will finish this one day. What Snake is unaware of is that he actually killed Venom Snake. The fake Big Boss that was actually the medic during the Phantom Pain game went on to fulfill what he thought was the Big Boss's goals, such as taking over Outer Heaven. So when Solid Snake killed Big Boss, he actually killed the stand-in, and the real Big Boss was still alive, working secretly with Cypher. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our entire Metal Gear saga. We will be bringing you part 2 very soon, so don't worry, you won't have to wait that long. It was just so large together that we couldn't make it one video. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter @EligibleMonster, and we'll see you next time right here.